አደባባይ ሚዲያ ለወገንተኝነት ጀርባውን የሰጠ ጊዜያዊ ጥቅምን አምቢኝ ብለው የዘመመን ሊያቀና እውነትና እውቀትን አስከትሎ ኢኮኖሚያዊና መንፈሳዊ መረጃዎችን እንካችሁ ይላል። ትኩስ ዜናዎች፣ ዘጋቢ ፊልሞች፣ ጥልቅ ትንታኔዎች በአደባባይ ሚዲያ ይቀርባሉ። ራእያችን ጊዜውን ያማከለና ዘመኑን የዋጀ በእውነት የነጠሩ መረጃዎችን በእውቀት ደግፎ ለሀገራችን ብሎም ለዓለም ሕዝብ ማዳረስ ነው። አድሬሳችን አደባባይ info@gmail.com፣ ዌብሳይታችን www.adebabai.com። ያግኙን፣ ይርዱን። የሁላችንም ስለሆነች ኢትዮጵያ በአደባባይ እንዘግባለን። አደባባይ ሚዲያ።
እንኳን ከዘመነ ዮሐንስ ወደ ዘመነ ማቴዎስ በሰላም በጤና አሸጋገረን። አዲሱ ዓመት የሰላም፣ የፍቅር፣ የጤና፣ የአብሮነትና የስኬት ዓመት እንዲሆን አደባባይ ሚዲያ መልካም ምኞቱን ይገልጻል።
በአዲስ ዓመት ኢትዮጵያውያን በተስፋ ስሜት ይለመልማሉ። ታዳጊዎች በባህል ልብስ አሸብርቀው በደስታ ይፈነድቃሉ። ችቦም አቀጣጥለው እዮህ አበባዬ መስከረም ጠባዬ በማለት አዲሱን ዓመት በደስታ ይቀበሉታል።
አደባባይ ሚዲያ በአዲስ ዓመት በተሟላ ዝግጅት በእውነት ላይ ተመስርቶ መረጃዎችን ለእናንተ ለውድ ተመልካቾቻችን ለማድረስ እንደ ወትሮ ሁሉ ትኩስ ዜናዎች፣ ጥልቅ ትንታኔዎች፣ ቃለ መጠይቆች፣ ዘጋቢ ፊልሞች በነጠረ እውነትና በላቀ እውቀት ላይ በመመስረት በአደባባይ ሚዲያ ይስተናገዳሉ። የሁላችንም ስለሆነችው ኢትዮጵያ በአደባባይ እንዘግባለን። መልካም አዲስ ዓመት። አደባባይ ሚዲያ። Happy New Year, everyone, and thank you for joining us from around the world. This is Adebabay Media's VR Digest program. My name is Hiwet. Today, I'll be your host. Today, we'll be in conversation with Dawit Muluneh for him to talk to us about his book, as well as his experience of serving in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. Stay with us. Thank you, Dawit, for being here. We really appreciate it, and Happy New Year. I just want to thank you. I just want to introduce you a little bit from my side, and then you could add on this as well if there's anything I missed. Dawit has grown up in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church and has spent the last decade or so traveling around the US teaching the youth in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. He did his undergraduate in mechanical engineering, as well as he worked in that field for a few years. He then traveled to Ethiopia for a couple of years to learn more about the Ethiopian Orthodox teaching as well. Since he's come back, he has started a podcast, wrote a book called I Need Answers, in which he shares with us his experience and his journey in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, as well as provide some frequently asked questions about the Ethiopian Orthodox teachings. He is currently a PhD candidate, studying in the field of Ethiopic studies, minoring in Arabic studies as well. So thank you, Adebabay, for being here again.
Thank you for having me, and Happy New Year as well.
Happy New Year. So in your own word, who is Dawit?
Wow. First of all, I'm very glad to be here. I have to say, this is a great program that I'm a great fan. And to be here is really amazing. And I'm delighted and honored to talk to you and everyone else here about, all the things that we're going to be talking about, which are very, very important topics in light of everything that's going on right now. But of course, the question is not related with that. The question is about me, and I'm going to boast a little bit, talk about myself a little bit. But I mean, that's a tough question. But if I had to pick like one word to describe me, it would be a student. And there's a biblical verse that kind of like talks about this, and I think that captivates what I'm trying to say. It's in 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 18, and says, "But grow in the grace and knowledge of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ." So about everything that I try to do, I try to grow, and like I don't want to be at the same level again. Like next year, if we were to talk, if you invite me back here, I'll be delighted.
Yes.
I at the same level that I'm at right now. I want to grow in all aspects of my academically. I want to grow spiritually. I want to grow. Unfortunately, weight-wise, I'm growing too, but that's a separate topic. But in all aspects of my life, I want to make sure that I'm growing, especially when it comes to the church and my spiritual journey with God.
That's a beautiful place to be, and that's a really awesome way to describe one's journey as well. So I guess in relation to that, would you share with us about what you consider your journey to Christ is, or your journey in the church is, in however way you see that?
Sure. I think I've talked about this a couple of times and other platforms as well. And, I kind of grew up in America at Kadis Mariam Beit Christian in DC, the famous DC Mariam church is what people would call it. So I grew up there. I was known as the Kabaro kid. I loved hitting Kabaro, and I did like all the things that I think young people did at the time when I was growing up. I'm not going to tell you when it was because you're going to guess my age. I don't want people to know my age. I shaved my head because my hairline was receding.
Are we hiding the whites?
I had to hide a lot of stuff. But I think, growing up, I did what other kids did, but it wasn't until I got to college that I started realizing, wait a minute, like all this stuff I'm doing is because my parents are taking me to church. And there's nothing really like for me that I am taking from this church. And I had to admit and face the fact that I had a lot of doubts. And that's something that I didn't really talk about when I was young. This attitude about asking, right? This attitude about saying, hey, I don't understand this. It was you sing the mazmur when you go to church and you go to Qaddasi, and that's what you do. And there was no question. Side note. We are failing our kids. I think everybody knows this. We say this, but I don't understand. I don't think people really understand how deep this issue is, right? It's a huge issue. And we see it all the time. People go away to college and they never come back. And it's because even in my school, there was like a professor who would openly say, he would ask questions like, what if the Bible is the side or the story of God? Like the saying, like there's two sides to the story. So he's like, what's the side of the devil? And this is the type of questions that the professor was asking students. Sure enough, young kids would have to start questioning about God. Yeah, what about all this stuff and everything like that? And that created doubt in many people's hearts, including mine. And I had a lot of questions about my faith. I had questions about the church. I had questions about God, really. Eventually, the story is long. I'm making it short. Eventually, I decided that I needed to investigate. Now, as you mentioned so eloquently in the beginning, my undergrad is in engineering. So I have a very logical mind. Like I'm all about logic and method. So I needed to understand this whole thing that people are calling religion. It had to make sense to me. So that's when I took the time to read as much as I could, and ask questions. I was like, at school, I was away, but I was still calling church fathers and asking questions. So all this stuff, I was the guy that you couldn't get rid of, right? Eventually, I came to the point that actually, to back up, before I even started this journey, I remember, and I tell this story all the time, I did a prayer that was kind of bold. And the prayer in short was, I really wanted to figure out who God was. And I wanted to start this quest. But before that, I remember with all that doubt on my head, getting on my knee and praying and saying, God, you said to knock and I'll open the door. Well, I'm knocking. And if you don't open, it's your fault. And it was such a bold statement, but I really meant it. Like when I said I wanted to seek God, I really wanted to seek him. It wasn't a lazy cop out where I think a lot of people do when they can't, they don't want to prescribe to what religion says, or they think it makes you do or whatnot. That wasn't my intent. My intent was really to find God. I really wanted to find God. So after on this quest, it made sense to me. I mean, it was something that I couldn't turn away from. But there was still one aspect that was missing, which was I understood God intellectually, but I still needed to understand him spiritually. And that's when I had to enter the second level of prayer, which was to experience him, right? To get to know him. And that's different from up here. That's here. That's in your heart. Right. And that aspect was a second prayer that I had to do, to really much more modest prayer, which essentially was saying, God, I will go wherever you tell me to go, and I'll be anything that you tell me to be. And I really meant that at the time. And after doing that, I could say that was the beginning of a new life, a new chapter in my life.
I love that. I love the differentiation that you're showing us, that there is a difference between understanding God intellectually, and there's a difference between understanding God and experiencing him in our own lives. And it's such a beautiful prayer to even be able to pray and really submit to that prayer, even though, right, it's a hard thing to submit to the things that you say you would do, especially when it comes to wanting to experience God. So I love that. Thank you for sharing that with us. And if I could take you to Ethiopia, I guess that journey would take you to Ethiopia eventually, right? And why did you pick the Kene school to go to?
Yeah, so it's a funny story, and I like to tell it. It was so when I came back from college, when I was reading all this stuff and everything that's going on in my head is like, wow, like our church is beautiful, right? And in my mind, I'm always thinking like, if only the rest of like my friends knew about it, like nobody would be leaving the church. Like if people knew how beautiful this church is, if they're reading the same thing that I, and that's really how I started getting into Sunday school, right? Or teaching, I should say. So that's when I was like, people have to know this. Like our church is amazing, right? Like we have to tell the world. And it was, I started teaching Sunday school, and I remember, again, I talk about this a lot because, it kind of shaped me. When I would open what we call commentaries or Andimta Mezaft, most of them are written in Giz. And I would go to church fathers and I would ask them, hey, what does this mean? What does this mean? And they would often tell me, this is not for you. We had to learn this in the monastery. And I was like, not a bad idea. You know what I mean? Like,
so you took it as a challenge.
I took it as a challenge. My parents, even when like after college, I would never leave my house. And I was known for that. I would like stick and read. And I was just like that guy, right? So my parents were like, you need to go out and do things. What, you think you were in a monastery? I was like, Like, not a bad idea. This is great encouragement. Yeah. So I was thinking to myself, like, apparently people keep saying you're not in a monastery to learn these things. So that means I need to go to a monastery, learn these things, right? Like, so that's really when I started going towards thinking about monastery. Now, specifically Kene, Kene is amazing. I just, Kene is just when I say the word, I just get excited. So the word Kene is derived from the Ethiopic Kanaya, which means gaza, not to purchase, but to subdue, to control, right? And it's the idea that, like, Kene, especially if you're doing Kene, like, it controls your mind. And honestly, especially after I came back from Ethiopia, like, sometimes I'll be driving and I'm like, okay, I'm going to do a Kene. And I started driving and, like, tesakrialish. Like, it sounds bad in English, like you get drunk, but really, I mean, like, you're in a different world, right? Like, you're just, your mind goes away. You can't even explain it. And I forget where I'm at. And sometimes, like, I'm doing Kene and stuff and I miss my exit by like 30 minutes. And I'm like in a different part of town. And I realize, I'm like, I got things to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Don't do Kene and drive. Don't do that, because it's like
I promise not to. But okay.
The love is just, you can't explain it until you start doing it. It puts you in a different place. Now, that's the emotional attachment to it. But the benefit is, Kene is like the key to the church, as church fathers would say. And I see why. Now, as I said, I look at myself as a student. I would never say I'm a connoisseur of Kene. People have asked me, oh, I heard you know Kene, or you know Ge'ez. And no, I don't, right? Because if I say no Ge'ez, what are the Likaunt gonna say? Like, if I am claiming to be a Kene knower, someone who knows Kene, what are, like, Marigetoch gonna say, right? Like, we can't be on the same level. So I like to think of myself as a student of Kene, and there are people who are, knowers. So, again, Kene is the key, and because I've been able to see part of it, I can honestly say, at least I know the church intellectually. Again, I won't claim that I live the life. That's a separate conversation that me and my confession father are struggling with. But in terms of like getting to see and getting to read, like, the holy books that our forefathers have left us, I mean, that is a great blessing to even touch these things, right? To go to a monastery, hold in your hands parchments and writings and brana that, like, our forefathers held in their hands hundreds and hundreds of years ago. I mean, that does something to and Kene is what opens the door to all these blessings and great things that it has to offer.
So it gave you access to a lot of the teachings of the church. Is that if that's what you're saying?
I mean, for example, one of Qaddashi, for example, right? The most important prayer of the church. I mean, Qaddashi is extremely central. Many people may not understand what it's saying. Of course, you can look at the English translation, but even simple things, keep in mind, my Amharic is bad, right? People tell me my English is bad, so I just don't know what language I speak at this point. But like, really, like, I struggle speaking Amharic and understanding Amharic. So for me, Ge'ez is just a different world. I just don't understand, like, what is Wi'atu? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what these things are. So for me to learn, it might be just a small bit, but that bit that I took, like, just when you stand in Qaddashi, you begin to hear the things, and like, it's really moving. I mean, yeah, the melody is moving, but the words are so poetic. And then you begin to again understand the teachings of the church, especially Andimta. When you open Andimta, those who've seen Andimta know, like, sometimes I would write like explanation commentary. This verse is like something, and they would write in Ge'ez and say "Ndalono," and they will finish it. That's the explanation. If you don't speak, you still didn't understand anything. So it's very important, as I think, especially somebody who's claiming to teach, to at least understand bits and parts of it. And I that's what has enabled me to do. Again, I don't claim that I know anything, but yeah.
So could you give us a bit of like the vision of what the Kane school look like? Because I can't imagine how the classes would be set up in. So if you could tell us how the day-to-day look like, how many students were there? Did you guys have like a couple of students, like teachers, or just one? How does that look like?
Yeah. So it was, it has two parts, right? So there's a morning part and an evening part. The morning part is called Negara. Now, first of all, we have what we call traditional schools. They call them Qolo Timirte Beit. I think that's extremely and here's why. I don't think that's true. That's not representative. Qolo Timirte Beit has the notion that the students who go to school have qolo to eat. They don't have anything to eat. So it's, whenever we call them Yokolo Tamari, it's then, like the name makes it seem like they even have qolo to eat, but they have nothing. There are some students who have literally nothing to eat, but what is driving them forward is the hope that one day they're going to be the future of the church. This is amazing stuff.
Wow. Yeah.
This is amazing. Kids are running away from an opportunity to learn modern school. I'll get to that in a second, whatever that means. To stay in the traditional schools, whatever that means, for the hope that one day they're going to be the leader of the church. This is amazing, amazing stuff. From this, what is so-called the Qolo Timirte or traditional schools, Kane stands out. Kane school, none of the schools are like Kane schools. Of course, it sounds very biased when I say it because that's the only school I attended. But if you go and ask other scholars of the church, I'm sure they will agree with me. There's nothing like Kane school. It's really amazing.
Awesome.
Yeah. So there's two parts. There's the morning session and the evening session. So the first session is called Nagara, and literally the telling. I mean, that's like, it doesn't do it justice, right? Like you're like, the telling of what? So what it is the idea is really early in the morning, probably like 8 saat. I have to remember the Ethiopic way of counting. So like, and then like you're supposed to wake up even earlier than that. And then you do what's called Kane Kotara, literally the counting of Kane. Now, so the student has to prepare the Kane ahead of time before the teacher arrives. And during the period of Negara, the telling, each student appears before the teacher and he tells the Kane that he has prepared. Now, Kane Kotara, if you ask the old timers, like the Meragetas older than us, they don't really count. Right? There's a counting system. There's an old system of Kane and a new system of Kane. The old one is really hard. It's based on, like, you have to know your stuff. Like, and those are the scholars of the church. But apparently, they wanted to make it easy for, so they have like a new system that's embedded. That's like a mathematical equation, like that's gone wild. I mean, it's very difficult. It's all about syllables. It's all about like what syllable has what. And if like, especially if I'm doing like like I count my fingers, like you will see me. I'm like, and I'm trying to make sure the syllables is fitting. It has to fit accordingly. And then you have to bring this word and put it there. It has to rhyme. It has to go into this, it's very difficult. Like one time I was doing Kane at home and I'm like this, and my dad is like, what's wrong? Like, and it's like, no. Like I'm like somewhere else. And you have to do all these things. So you do that in the morning, your head hurts, the time is gone. You go find the teacher, and then all the students are sitting down. One by one, the student comes up and he does his Kane in front of the teacher. Imagine. In front of the students. One time, true story. I got a story. I got stories for days. So one time I was, this is kind of the time that I was like growing, like midway there, right? So I learned some stuff, but not, So I went there. I stood before the student. I said, I didn't want Kanye. But there was like other students everywhere. You know, they scattered and people are, you know, nobody's really paying attention to me. This guy, whatever. They got used to me. This American guy. So I'm saying something and my teacher, he steps back. He's like, that was amazing. I was like, I know. Thank you. Thank you. And he said, no, that was amazing. That was amazing. He's like, class, everybody come here. Come here. And I'm like, I got this. This is going to be great. And then he says, do your kene again. And I do the kene. Everybody starts laughing. Oh, moti shala. Oh. And I look at my teacher. Why would you do that? Why would you do that?
Yeah.
And because I made a mistake. He said, I don't want you to ever forget this mistake. I don't want you. And I said, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Now, that was a method he used to teach a lesson. That was a method he used to teach a lesson. And the kids that were laughing were kids.
Mm-hmm.
What saddens me is this same attitude is embedded in our community.
What do you mean?
But by people who are claiming to be leaders. That spirit of laughter should cause everyone to cry. The teacher is using a method to teach, to straighten someone. This method here, when someone rises up to do something positive, and instead of working with him to make sure that goes away, and instead of pointing fingers and laughing, when someone fails, to laugh at their failure, this is not the spirit of God. I remember a long time ago, I was with my great aunt. This is back, I'm not going to tell you when. I was a little kid. This is back in Ethiopia, before I even came to America. I still remember this. We were watching TV. You know, back then, like this is the big TV that comes out and all that stuff. And we were watching soccer. And my great aunt, I just don't get it. And I'm like, what's wrong? Of course, she's speaking Amharic. She's like, why don't they give everybody soccer balls so they don't have to fight over it? I was like, that's so cute. Like, that's adorable, right? I was like, no, championship. It just doesn't work. It's a competition, right? It just doesn't work. But what does not make sense is, what are we competing for?
Yeah.
We have all been given righteousness, or the ability to receive righteousness. We all have been given salvation. We all claim we are part of the Orthodox, but yet we are fighting with one another. What is funny about this? But yet we are laughing at one another. This is the saddest thing of all. In a time where we're supposed to work together, at a period where people are trying to divide us, we have decided to divide with one another, claiming we have the same vision, claiming that we have the same mission. But at this time of darkness, we ought to come together, which brings me to the second point, the second part of Kani. When everybody gathers together. We all
This is in the afternoon?
This is at nighttime.
Okay, nighttime.
At nighttime, yeah. Everybody is gathered together. Everybody comes together to listen together to our teacher. You see how beautiful it is?
Mm-hmm.
And the teacher, he begins to tell Kenny, this is a professional. Everybody listens. Everybody listens. And the teacher, Kenny. But there's some, like, especially when I was, when I first started out, I didn't know what he was saying. So what the teacher would do, he would assign someone called Askatsai, which is, I would liken it to any TA, but it's not really. It's not really. And their job is to make sure that, like, the new students are able to catch on to their teachings. This is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This is the tradition of not just any school, but the traditional schools of the Ethiopian Orthodox Swaru Church. The teacher assigns the more advanced students to guide along. So as students are learning, they're experiencing leadership, and they're learning how to teach. Now you could sit there and you could say, like, what's amazing about this? I mean, that's not this amazing. This is the tradition that's been going back for years and years and years. Taddasa Tamrat talks about in his book of Church and the State that these traditional schools might have started at the time of the expansion of the monastery. Now, if his analysis is correct, that puts it around the time of Iyesus Mo'a, early 13th century. That's in the dynasty of Zagwe. That's really early. So we're talking about in the time of the 13th century, the Ethiopian church already had a system to educate its children in this sophisticated manner. I mean, that's amazing. But why do we never learn about it? I wonder why. I wonder why. For so many centuries, all across the world, we have been silent about the positive things that Africa had to produce. Take, for example, saints. You have Basil the Great, Leo the Great, Moses the Black. What happened? Why the Black? Why not the Great? Why is he not great? Moses Alim. We even acknowledge it. We acknowledge his blackness, right? But why call him black? Why? No one has called somebody the white. I don't know any saint that's claimed that, or somebody the Asian. Like, there's no such labels like this, right? But we have Moses the Black characterizing even saints down to their color. This game of putting Africans backward has been going on for a long time. And for this reason, the church has not gotten its due justice across the world of how great and magnificent it is. This church is supposed to be a jewel, not only for its nation, which I'll make the case later on, but for the world. But unfortunately, people have not learned about it. People have not studied it. Instead, we have attempted to fraction the church through trivial matters about things that we don't even know where it came from. This is the saddest thing. We have such a beautiful culture, a beautiful tradition, but unfortunately, because of sad reasons, we're not able to talk about it.
But can we also make the case that we did this to ourselves, in that sense of when we decided to modernize, whatever that means, our educational system, we completely took the Western idea of education and got rid of the traditional one and just kind of like put it as like, oh, that's just a church's thing. It's not the Ethiopian kind of education. And now it's that idea of us thinking the Western education is better for us, and it's a way for us to modernize and a way for us to join the rest of the world. No one forced us to do that, right? We are not colonized. We can't blame anybody else for that. We did that to ourselves. So where is our responsibility that we take in the sense of when someone writes, about saints and calls it Moses the Black, we're not writing that book, right? Someone else is writing for us because we are not well educated in our traditional education. We don't know the knowledges. We don't know what already exists in Ethiopia because we spent so many years in our educational system learning about Western ideology, Western philosophy, Western way of doing things, right?
Absolutely. And I think you said it perfectly. For me, there's nothing wrong with evolving. Even biology teaches us that's the way that we grow. Evolution is a part of life, and it everywhere, every time. We need to do it. There's nothing wrong with revising the system that you have and saying we could do better. We must do that. We must grow and evolve from one generation to the next. The problem right now is this attitude that the West, the others, I should say, are better than us. Therefore, I will jettison all of my tradition, all of my identity, to trade it with whatever the other has to provide me. You bring up iconography, which is a perfect point for this. Westerners have came to Ethiopia, learned the way that we depict saints and all this stuff, and they've adapted the teachings and brought it back to the West and evolved their art. They've done. We've studied this. We can see this. But for us, we have our own system. We have our own case. But most of the time when you go into, especially like Adebabay and stuff like that, what kind of icons do we see emerging? Right? The icons of the West. So as I don't know if you mentioned it before, but I'm part of course, YOTC, Young Orthodox Sahara Christians, and I'm also part of UOTY. So in these two organizations, really big organizations that have really done amazing work in evangelizing not just Ethiopians but non-Ethiopians. And recently, there are African Americans who've been baptized into the Ethiopian Orthodox Sahara Church. And the reason why, especially this church, is beginning to attract a lot of African Americans because they want to kind of get away from this Christianity that they feel has been brought up by the white man. And that's a different conversation. So they come to the Ethiopian Orthodox Sahara Church looking for hope, the true African church that will like free us. They come and the first thing they encounter is white Jesus, and they question, why is that? And this is a major question. When I first heard this question, I was like, please, I ain't nobody got time for that. You know, I got things to do.
I mean, it's in different context, right? Historically, that's a different context for us to understand. Okay.
Not only different context, but we've also have to understand that, but why? We have our own tradition, but why? We have our own way of depicting our Lord and our Savior Jesus. Why are we putting that aside? Why are we doing that? We have our own way, our own system of doing this. Again, there's nothing wrong with growing and seeing things, but just to throw everything to the side is not a good way to go about things. Again, any traditional schools really doesn't get, and just the traditional schools of Ethiopia, it really doesn't get enough credit. I think we had something really amazing going on, and like you said, we just crushed it without really examining the positive side of it.
Yes, absolutely. So if I could direct the question a little bit into a different direction, let's talk about your book for a little bit. So I need answers. It's I've seen it in almost every church I've been to now. It's almost everyone I know is reading it or has read it. What was your intention for the book?
Yeah. So in terms of the book, my intention was, like I said, I was in college. I was reading a lot, and I was thinking to myself, like, wow, this church is beautiful. This is awesome. And I thought if people were able to understand the things that I was understanding, people would come into the church. So initially what happened is when I stopped college, I went to Sunday school and I started teaching Sunday school. And immediately the kids circled me and they would start asking questions, trying to understand the church. And so they requested that Sunday wasn't enough. They wanted more. And suddenly they started coming on Fridays of all days. And I'm not talking about like 10-year-olds. I'm talking about like 15, 16, 17-year-old kids. I remember situations where people would call up on Friday evenings, like at 8 p.m. and be like, hey, man, what's going on tonight? We're at Dawit's. And people would call each other from club.
Oh, I think we're disconnected.
አደባባይ ሚዲያ ለወገንተኝነት ጀርባውን የሰጠ ጊዜያዊ ጥቅምን አምቢኝ ብሎ የዘመመን ሊያቀና እውነትና እውቀትን አስከትሎ ኢኮኖሚያዊና መንፈሳዊ መረጃዎችን እንካችሁ ይላል። ትኩስ ዜናዎች፣ ዘጋቢ ፊልሞች፣ ጥልቅ ትንታኔዎች በአደባባይ ሚዲያ ይቀርባሉ። ራእያችን ጊዜውን ያማከለና ዘመኑን የዋጀ በእውነት የነጠሩ መረጃዎችን በእውቀት ደግፎ ለሀገራችን ብሎም ለዓለም ሕዝብ ማዳረስ ነው። አድሬሳችን አደባባይ ኢንፎ ሚዲያ @gmail.com፣ በዌብሳይታችን www.adebabai.com። ያግኙን፣ ይርዱን። የሁላችንም ስለሆነች ኢትዮጵያ በአደባባይ እንዘግባለን። አደባባይ ሚዲያ።
Welcome back, everyone. We apologize. I think we just got disconnected with our guest. Welcome, Dawit. I apologize for the break. So you're telling us about your experience of people coming to your house for Bible study. So you can go ahead and continue.
Yeah. Just to, I'm glad you said not my house, but the church. I don't want nobody at my house. I love people, but not that much. I want them to stay at home, not come to my. So we were at church, and people would be coming to the church. It was an amazing sight. But so eventually, I think, and people would stay up till like midnight. I mean, this was really the work of God, and I think it was at this time that I really understood that the generation wasn't leaving the church because they just didn't like the church or whatever. They just needed somebody to guide them along and help them understand how beautiful the church is. And I tell this a lot. People don't believe me. I mean, it is what it is. But I wrote the book in 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
But it was a 10-year in the making, right? Over 10 years, I've been teaching Sunday school and meeting kids and talking to people. And of course, that's the first draft. There was, I sent to priests and stuff to edit. That took, we're not going to talk about that. But the initial draft took 2 weeks because, again, it was already in the making and everything was up here. It was just the questions that like people were asking. I knew exactly what to put on paper.
Yeah. I know you speak very frankly about a lot of topics within our church, so we'll get back to that. But I was wondering if you actually have like a favorite chapter that you wrote from the book.
As an author, I don't think I'm allowed to say that. But I will say a chapter that really I did take my time on and talk about was the one on mental health. The struggle is real. And that one was hard. It was hard for 2 reasons. I wrote that during the time where, people, I noticed a lot of people from our community was committing suicide. And that's something that's really deep to my heart because I've seen it so many times, but yet we don't talk about it. Our community has seen too many young people take their own lives. When I wrote the book, like I said, I wrote the book and I sent it to different people to edit and stuff like that. So I sent it to my parents to say, hey, what do you think? And they read the chapter and they said, oh, this is very personal. Like, do you really want, like people you don't know reading about your story and stuff? No, I don't want that. I don't want people to know about my business. I really don't. But I think if it can save one person, then I think it's worth it. In there, I talk about how severely I was bullied. People don't know this, especially people that kind of met me after college and stuff. They just know me as the Dawit, like goofs off saying, like ha ha, he, whatever. As a kid, I was severely bullied. It was really, really, really bad. And oftentimes I would come home and cry and I had like literally no friends, especially in middle school. I went to a predominantly white school and people would come and, like say the meanest things to me. So writing that chapter was hard. It was difficult. I just did the podcast for that chapter. It's going to come out this next week. What day is today? A week from today. This exact topic. So this is something that's very emotional.
Yeah. I think I'm just wondering because my experience has been I remember I was having such a hard time, especially freshman year of college, and not only that, I think it's not just the mental health problem of it that was bothering me most. It's the shame that I felt because quote unquote I had no problems, but I didn't know how to deal with myself. I didn't know how to deal with the problems that I had, and I started seeking help but there was still that like stigma that I knew that existed. So I didn't really tell my friends, or I didn't really like tell anyone that was around me. And I remember one time I was having a conversation with one of my African professors, and he outright said, you know, Africans don't get depressed, that like we have better problems to worry about than being depressed. And now that mindset of like, oh, Ethiopians don't get depressed, even though we see it happening to our community members, we see it happening to our brothers and sisters, we see it happening. But do you think maybe part of that problem, part of that stigma is also because we don't have the words to describe what we're feeling, right? I don't know how to say I'm depressed in Amarinya. I don't know how to say I'm stressed in Amarinya. I don't know how to say like anxiety in Amarinya, right? So like when you take away the word of not being able to describe that to your parents, right? Where do you go? How do you describe how you're feeling without, you know, feeling the shame that comes with it because of all the stigma that is attached to that situation?
I do think I've heard that theory before, and I do think that's part of it. I think a bigger point is, and I'm not a psychologist, I'm not, you know, I really believe just from conversations with my parents and stuff like that, keep in mind, we're talking about a generation that grew up under the Red Terror, right? So this is a generation, they were worried about being killed. Literally, like they didn't know, like anytime we could be killed. And their biggest problem wasn't they didn't get their right shoes, or somebody bullied them on Facebook because they didn't like their picture. That wasn't their problem. They had bigger things to worry about. So for in their minds and parents' minds, kids have food, they sleep, they wake up, go to school, good. You know, like they didn't have that.
It's done.
Yeah, they didn't have that. So when a kid says, I'm bullied, are you eating? Oh, what's wrong? You know? So it's that mindset that I really, really, really think is affecting parents from understanding what depression is. Because again, to them, depression is like hardship and stuff like that. For example, like, you know, a lot of young girls after they give birth, they go through depression. This is something a lot of older parents, they just don't understand that kind of like, kids are blessing. Why are you sad? You know, like it's that kind of mindset that I think is really, really negative and holding kids to open up. And the more they hold it in, the worse the problem gets.
So if I could get a bit personal, you don't have to answer this, but how have you been able to gap that bridge between yourself and your parents? What has helped, and what are some of the things that you've experienced, you've seen has been working for people that are listening, to start having this conversation at home, to start having this conversation at church, and to work on, you know, removing the stigma around this and being able to talk about this in a frank terms?
Right. So I think I do talk about it in the book, and especially I would say 7th grade was the worst year for me. In terms of physically, I gained a lot of weight, and kids were just making fun of me. For people who don't know, I have a leg problem. I've had surgery twice. I limp, especially like when I'm doing sports or whatever. It shows kids are mean. And I thought about suicide. I really like that was like the really, really tough year for me. Luckily, we moved to another school, and I started having friends, and that's when I started gaining my confidence. I started playing sports and did all other stuff that, you know, regular kids do. But then, you know, when I decided to talk to my parents, and I wrote an email talking about my feelings and what I felt, and my parents, you know, they're loving parents, but they just couldn't understand what was happening. And it took several conversations. It wasn't just one. It took several conversations that really kind of made them say, oh, okay, we get it. You know, like, and that it's a process. It's not an event, but a process. Luckily for me, I really like this. This is why I feel very emotional about the church. Is the church saved me multiple times. And if it wasn't for the church, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. And because I was around church, I had friends, I had people to lean on. I can't imagine, especially those years where in school I had like literally nobody to talk to. I don't know what I would have done. I really don't. That was a few tough years.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that with us. Another topic that I found really interesting and frank, because you write very frankly about a lot of topics, like I said, is the idea of like the love of sin and the process of confession, right? How excruciating that could be, especially when you're starting out or when you're even like trying to question where you are, and even getting out of that thing, like, the things that I've learned from them, right? So how do I process that into saying this was a mistake that I should have a conversation with my confession father? So how was that process for you? How did you go about finding a confession father that worked for you? How did you reconcile some of your experiences in college that may not necessarily be, the best of who we could be, right?
Well, I'll tell you. So there was a priest at my church who I feared. I mean, he just never smiled, So I was just like, okay, I'm gonna stay away. And it was just like, I was scared. So I decided that I was gonna go to Coptic Orthodox Church, which is like their sister church. I went, I confessed, but I just didn't feel like it wasn't there. I was like, no, like I don't feel it, it wasn't. So I said, you know what? I'm gonna go confess to the priest that I'm scared of and tell him that I was scared to confess to him. That was gonna be my confession. So
why?
Because I felt like I had to face my fear. Right. And now I'm like a different person, but back then I was like really hungry for God. Right. So like, I remember thinking I wasn't afraid of God when I was doing these sins. Why am I scared of him? And that was really my attitude. And I always would say, like, when I was like getting uncomfortable and stuff, I would say, how bad do I want salvation? I want it bad. And then and then I would go, like, whenever like I would hesitate about something, I would always ask, how bad do I want this? I want it bad. And I'll just I'll keep going more. So that was the thing. But on the idea of this clergy member, I do want to say something. We are in a huge crisis, right? And we often so we often talk about the fact that young people are leaving the church. Young people are leaving the church. Oh no, we need to hold on to the people, to the young people. But young people are not really leaving the church. It's just that they don't know what to do, and they don't know what to hold on. Especially again at this time when things are getting tough and when things are getting hard. People just want to hold on to whatever thing that they need to do. So I was reading this thing about the Holocaust and the concentration camps and the Jews, and I read something interesting, which is during that time in the concentration camps, when the Jews were being tortured and all that stuff, it turned out that most of the Jews took parchments of the Torah and they hid it in their clothes and under their bed and stuff. I understand the context and the period of what it was going on there, right? So at that period, if they were caught with their parchment, that meant they would be killed. But they held on to a small piece, cut a small piece, and held it for themselves. The question is, why did they just cut a small piece out? Why not take the whole Torah with them? Well, I think the answer is obvious. It's because that's all they could hold on to, right? But yet they decided to hold on to it because that was their hope. And hope is a beautiful thing. And that's what our church can bring to the world. Now, going back to the clergy members, and the reason why I say there's a crisis is many, many, many people are leaving the church in mass numbers. And I don't think we have woken up yet. I don't think we're doing what we need to do to save these young people. And the reason why I'm saying this is because there's a lot of Ethio-Americans that are trying to hold on to whatever they can, but they can't. So they end up going to the church nearby and they're leaving in mass numbers. But I just want to say quickly, church fathers have got to do something about this crisis. As the saying goes, and And I know I'm not at a part to speak up to the bishops and priests of the church, but I will say that you have been entrusted with the lives of these children, and not enough is being done. These kids are lost. We're in an era where people, young folks, want to learn about their church, but we can't find a teacher to teach them. We're living in an era where young people want to confess their sins, but can't find a confession father. We have got to do better, especially, I know this is not my place, but especially confession fathers. There will be a day where spiritual fathers will stand before God and have to answer for why all these young people have left the church. This is a calling for church fathers to save their kids. To save their kids. We're not doing enough. Many people are leaving. And yet, we're arguing and fighting about things that we don't need to be doing. Again, I am not worthy to speak in this manner. So I'll leave you with the words of John Chrysostom in his book on priesthood as he's conversing with St. Basil. He says the following: "He indeed who has lost sheep, either through the ravages of wolves or the attack of robbers, or through murrain or any other disaster befalling them, might perhaps obtain some indulgence from the owner of the flock. And even if the latter should demand satisfaction, the penalty would be only a matter of money. But he who has human beings entrusted to him, the rational flock of Christ, incurs a penalty in the first place for the loss of the sheep, which goes beyond material things and touches his own life." These are the words of St. Chrysostom, John Chrysostom, on priesthood. My dear fathers, you've been entrusted with the lives and the souls of the flock of Christ. We've got to do better in saving these children who want to stay but can't find a leader to follow. We've got to do better.
I want us to continue this conversation about your book, but can we take a quick break? And is there any you could share with us?
Oh, sure. Sure, I can do a quick any. This is for Adebabay.
Oh, wow.
And it's just a small kane. And it goes something like this. I'm so excited. I'm just whenever we I just start smiling. በሌሊት እኩይ እንዘ ይረውጽ ጎየ በሌሊት እኩይ እንዘ ይረውጽ ጎየ ድንጋይን በአደባባይ ሲያነሳ ስላየ ብልማ ድንጋይን በአደባባይ ሲያነሳ ስላየ መፍትወ አሚን ብሉይ እንተ ምግባሩ ሰነየ ነው እንግዲህ the meaning of this is በሌሊት እኩይ እንዘ ይረውጽ ጎየ. This evil man during the night he fled running as fast as he could. Why? ድንጋይን በአደባባይ ሲያነሳ ስላየ. This is clear. Because he saw መፍትወ አሚን ብሉይ, an old man whose work is great, an old man picking up rock in an open meadow in Adebabay. He was picking up rock. A person who picks up rock is ready to fight. A person who picks up rock is ready to fight. So the evil man runs away because he's scared, right? So Kanye has summon work. This is the sum. The work is balelit. We are in the midst of very trying times, very hard times. And the evil, we know who the evil one is against us. At this time, Bulwi, a wise man, an old man, who is unable to defeat him by himself, he should pick up the rock. The rock is Christ. We have to be able to pick up Christ at this time. Ba'adebabay malet, this great station that we're in is called Adebabay. And in these times, the true wise ones should come and discuss the things of Christ, to defeat all the enemy through this media that we have that we are calling Adebabay.
Mhm.
Right? So that is the meaning of the kane.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that. So one more topic from your book, relationships. Why did you choose to talk about relationships in a way that you did? And because for me, honestly, I have never seen it being spoken in those terms in our church, which is very unfortunate. Just about recently now, there's a deacon in Ethiopia that's starting to talk about what it means to date. And I've seen YOTC had a sermon with Adebabay, I believe, about that as well. But it's very, very new, right? So why did you decide to talk about it? And what was your aim for that conversation?
We could talk about this more, but to say that I think we treat dating in a very wrong way, and we could talk about this after some time if you'd like.
Okay. So. What did you mean by sometime, after some time?
I think break.
እንኳን ከዘመነ ዮሐንስ ወደ ዘመነ ማቴዎስ በሰላም በጤና አሸጋገረን። አዲሱ ዓመት የሰላም፣ የፍቅር፣ የጤና፣ የአብሮነትና የስኬት ዓመት እንዲሆን አደባባይ ሚዲያ መልካም ምኞቱን ይገልጻል።
በአዲስ ዓመት ኢትዮጵያውያን በተስፋ ስሜት ይለመልማሉ። ታዳጊዎች በባህል ልብስ አሸብርቀው በደስታ ይፈነድቃሉ። ችቦም አቀጣጥለው እዮህ አበባዬ መስከረም ጠባዬ በማለት አዲሱን ዓመት በደስታ ይቀበሉታል።
አደባባይ ሚዲያ በአዲስ ዓመት በተሟላ ዝግጅት በእውነት ላይ ተመስርቶ መረጃዎችን ለእናንተ ለውድ ተመልካቾቻችን ለማድረስ እንደ ወትሮ ሁሉ ትኩስ ዜናዎች፣ ጥልቅ ትንታኔዎች፣ ቃለ መጠይቆች፣ ዘጋቢ ፊልሞች በነጠረ እውነትና በላቀ እውቀት ላይ በመመስረት በአደባባይ ሚዲያ ይስተናገዳሉ። የሁላችንም ስለሆነችው ኢትዮጵያ በአደባባይ እንዘግባለን። መልካም አዲስ ዓመት።
Thank you everyone for watching this with us. We're back now from our break and we're going to continue our conversation. Thank you, Diagon Dawit, for reminding me about break. You could definitely be my co-host for future events. So we were talking about relationships and why you chose to address that in a way that you did in a book.
Yes, so I think we look at relationships in a very wrong manner. And the reason why is, and I've heard, I believe Kasaifa Selassie speaking about this before, and it's so true. We grew up with our parents telling us, like, don't you date anyone. Pray and go to church and all this stuff. And then we reach mid-20s and parents suddenly start saying, why are you not married? So where is my window? I don't know where my window is, right? I have like one shot, So with that being said, I think we look at it and we're approaching dating in a very wrong manner. So the whole premise is marriage is one of the 7 sacraments of the church. This is a sacrament, marriage. And I don't think anybody disputes that. But if marriage is a sacrament, that means dating is a precursor to marriage. If marriage is spiritual, that means dating is spiritual. So dating is really the act, it's comparable to praying, fasting. I mean, we don't think about that because we've been engraved to think that it's something bad, so we don't talk about it, and people don't know how to date spiritually. And of course, that's the whole goal of this. Look, dating is a spiritual act. It's not even just something fun or whatever. It's a spiritual act and everything that comes along with it. Again, I go into the book about being responsible. There's a right way to go about it and a wrong way to go about it. Unfortunately, a lot of people choose to do it the wrong way because they haven't been taught what dating looks like spiritually. So yeah, that's why I decided to go about it in that manner.
Yeah, I think one thing that I've started to notice in churches is that there's that stigma of like dating someone within the church. And for me, that conversation always throw me off because I'm thinking, you know, wouldn't I want to date someone from the church, right? Someone from that worship God for me, that I know what they're about. But there's that sense of like, oh, I don't want to be seen. I don't want to get involved in if things don't work out, right? I don't want my name to be plastered all over the place. So how do we do that in a way? How do we date people around us within the church, get to know each other in a way that's respectful and in a way that also respects the boundaries of each other, and also knowing that we all worship in the same house?
Yeah, again, the problem is a stigma that culturally we've started. I know the Coptic Church has like services specifically centered around dating, and they have like this quick dating kind of service. I think you have to be like over 35 to enter, and it's like, you know, you're really like serious about marriage. It's not like a game, and they introduce people, and we're not there yet in our culture to do things like this. But it is a shame. It is often the case that, you know, people are like, no, but again, like if marriage is a spiritual act. I've argued the case for why, especially for younger folks, people are even scared of marriage. I'm beginning to see the younger generation, especially early and mid 20s, have this negative outlook of marriage that wasn't even around in my time. And again, I'm not going to tell you how old I am.
No, I'm starting to wonder because you mentioned it a few times now.
But you see young people really being turned off by this idea of marriage. And it comes from leadership. And I think it comes from the church to say, look, dating is healthy, it's spiritual. Just do it right and at the right time. Of course, when I talk about other things, I give the metaphor of game, and like there's rules to the game, and you got to play the right way and all this stuff, and it really works. I mean, like, yeah, it's supposed to be funny, but it's also educational if we take the advices seriously.
Yeah. Thank you. So, I mean, I could go on about this book, absolutely, but I feel like people should buy it and read it for themselves and know, the questions that we have. Definitely, I think one of the things I really appreciated about this book is how honest it was, how simple it was to read in a way that I felt like I was talking to you when I was reading the book as well. So where do we find this book, and what are other resources that are connected to the book? I know you have a podcast that goes with the book as well. Where do we find that?
Very good. So there's the book. The book is available on Amazon. And now there's an audio book as well. Those of you who don't like reading. There's a lot of people. So there's an audio book. The podcast is available on any like thing that you play a podcast on. Really, it's available on Apple Podcasts. It's available on Spotify. It's available on other stations as well. If I may take the time, please support these causes. A lot of the time, they're expensive to produce. And people are like, do more. I am a student, as we've talked about. So support, that's a big part of it.
Yeah, thank you. Can we shift our conversation a little bit to Ethiopia?
Sure. Oh, I knew this was coming.
So we've been listening. We've been watching and listening and seeing what's been happening in Ethiopia, especially to our church. How are you understanding it, and how are you dealing with it, I guess?
Right. Where to begin?
What is going on in Ethiopia?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's tough. It's tough. For the longest time, I would openly say that I have no connections with Ethiopia. None.
What do you mean?
I grew up here. I eat burger. My money's dollar, as one person said. So it's like I don't really have a connection emotionally or whatever. I'll tell you a story. When I was in high school, early college, around college period, we started a nonprofit organization. It's called CEO, Children of Ethiopia Organization. We collected books, and the idea was to send it back to Ethiopia and to help kids and all this stuff. And in the midst of collecting these books and trying to help, all of the older people told me, like, who do you think you are? Like, this, you're not Ethiopian or whatever. I had haters since day one. And they were like, you don't know anything about Ethiopia or whatever. And I said, all right, fine. I got nothing. That's fine. Like, I don't really care. I'm in America. I'm living my life. I'll do my thing. Then I got involved with the church. And I said, the only involvement I have with Ethiopia is through the church. Now I'm beginning to, like you said, I've entered my first year of the PhD program, and my major is in Ethiopic studies, meaning I'm studying the history of the Ethiopian church, but in lieu of the obviously the politics and stuff that's going on. And as I'm discovering how amazing Ethiopia is. This is an amazing country. And I just feel sad that a lot of young people will not take the time to really study their history and learn how beautiful this country is. People like the famous Cosmas Indicopoulos. I'm pretty sure I mispronounced the name, but hey, I'm a first-year PhD student. That's very famous. He's a traveler. He goes everywhere and he travels. He mentions Aksumite dynasty by name. People like the famous poet Mani likens the dynasty of Aksum to Rome, Persia, and China. He calls them the four dynasties. I mean, these are remarkable things that were happening. We're talking about in 5th, 4th, 3rd century. We had forefathers who spoke Greek and all this stuff. This country was amazing, historical. What made this nation great? The church. This church is what put this Africa on the map. We talk about Wakanda. That's Wakanda.
I love that.
It is. If we took the time to study how beautiful the country is. Unfortunately, we don't know the history. When people, whenever I hear people, I'll be like, get out of here, man. Like, come on, you're in America right now. What are you talking about? But that's reality. We have such a rich history, and I fear that the next generation will never know about it. Again, this is a problem. And the problem is that there's a lot of people who know nothing about the country, nothing about their history, but yet are trying to divide us apart. I have a story that will capture this idea. A tailor one day is sitting down and he grabs a piece of cloth. He grabs his scissors and he cuts the piece of cloth into different fragments. Then he throws the scissor on the ground. And he picks up a needle very carefully. He starts to weave in all the pieces together. His son sees all these things happening and he asks his father, Dad, I've noticed that you've picked up the scissor and you just threw it on the floor, but you took the needle carefully and you're putting the pieces together with it. But the scissor costs more than the needle. And the father smiles and he tells him, yeah, the scissor has its functions, but the scissor, all it does is just cut and separate things. It's the needle that's going to put us together. That's going to weave everything together. Right now, there are scissors out there that's trying to divide us apart. There will be a day where God is going to put them under his feet. Now, what's sad is that we can't find the needles of our generation, the leaders that's going to bring us together. Everyone is concentrating on what our differences are. Everyone is looking at how we're different instead of realizing that we are an amazing, amazing country, and we have more that unites us than that divides us. Going back to the topic of Kani, I actually have a Kani. I was thinking about this, and I started to come up with this Kani, and I really want, if I may. It's a bit longer than the previous one, and it goes something like this. Deka Azeb Yibelahu. Deka Azeb Yibelahu. ለጠቢበ ኩሉ አምላክ ዘበመላእክት ተአኩተ ደቀ አዜብ ይቤላሁ ለጠቢበ አምላክ ጠቢብ ዘበመላእክት ተአኩተ እንዘቦ አሐደ ርኤ ክልኤተ እንዘቦ አሐደ ርኤ ክልኤተ ወድህረ ጠቢበ አምላክ አእይንቲሁ ሀተተ አዘዞ ለደቅ ከመ ይቅባ ዘንተ ተዋህዶ ዘልዑል ቅብአተ። ይሄ ነው እንግዲህ ቅኔው። If people knew Kenny, they would be like clapping for me, but that's fine.
I'm clapping.
that's so the translation is Deka Azeb Bilahu. Azeb is also a name for Ethiopia. So the child of Azeb says, Let Abiba Kullu Amalak, for the doctor of all, for the wisest one of all. Amalak, the one who is exalted through by the angels. He's going to an eye doctor and he's talking to him. And he's telling him, I see double. Even though things are one, I'm seeing double. Mm. And that's our problem right now. We're one. We're one nation. But yet we're claiming we're two. What's wrong with our eyes? What difference are we seeing? And the Lord, after he has examined his eyes, and let me just say here, what amazes me is each person comes out and says, in the name of God, and they speak their filth, I'll say, of division. Each person is coming in the name of unity and subdividing. Invoking the name of God is saying, God be on our side. God be with us. Every one of these divisions are starting with a prayer. After God examined his eye, his heart, after he looked at it, አዘዞ ለደቅ to put on your eye. What kind of ointment?
I think we lost you, Dagon, for the last 10 seconds or so. If you could repeat that for us. It's all right.
It's the area I'm in. I'm still, So, he ordered him as a doctor that he put ointments on his eye. What kind of ointments? Tawahedo. One, if you want to look clearly again, be united. Tawahedo, be one. The second meaning, if you want to be united, follow the teachings of Tawahedo. Look back at the Orthodox Tawahedo Church. I don't care what your religion is. I don't care if you're Muslim. I don't care if you're Protestant. I don't care if you're atheist. I don't care if you hate the church. The answer is embedded in Tawahedo. I'm telling you, this church you can't separate the future of the country. If you want true peace, you've got to go back to Tawahedo. That's what it's been for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. We've lived in harmony with Muslims for so many centuries. That's been there. Of course, there's been wars. There's been wars in any world, in any part of the world. People have fought. But eventually, they've said, hey, it's better for us to be together. We are one. Why are we still fighting? Why are we still fighting? And this is the thing that breaks my heart. Ooh, now I'm fired up.
I mean, I really appreciate what you say, because I think we've gotten to that point in our history now where everything is debatable, and I'm just arguing for the sake of arguments, and really going through everything a one person says, trying to find what separates us as opposed to what unites us. And what we're not understanding is that whether we're doing it sitting here or whether we're doing it in Ethiopia, is that when we're talking about the legacy of Ethiopia that we're going to leave for the next generation, it's very questionable. Like you said, like, what are we going to pass down to them if everything that we're saying and doing is hate, right? We forget that how powerful words are, and we're using these words to hurt each other. We're leaving this legacy of filth, like you said, of words to hurt each other as opposed to build each other. So what is our responsibility in that sense for our church? Those of us that grew up here, those of us that are born here, those of us, like you said, maybe don't really have a lot at stake in Ethiopia. What is our responsibility for our church, and how do we continue to advocate for our church? And also, kind of like, this is multiple questions as well. How do we stay in solidarity with the martyrs that are being prosecuted right now?
Right. I think the responsibilities are going to be different according to who you are as a person. And I'll start with leadership. I think leaders have to be wise enough to say, what I am going to convey to my followers, is it helping or is it hurting? There has to be wisdom. And I think a leader is not in a position to share his opinion. Leaders cannot do that, because their opinion, whether how trivial they think it might be, has serious consequences. Serious consequences. You can't just make a claim that, I'm going to be very controversial for a second. When Trump talked about injecting bleach into our body, people were buying bleach to try it on themselves. I mean, these are the things that a leader does. When you start talking nonsense, you have nonsensical people that will follow you. You are not at liberty to start saying things that's just your opinion. True story. Several years ago, there was serious feud between Argentina and Chile, right? And the two were at war for a long time or whatever, and they decided to erect a statue of Christ as a symbol for peace. Mm-hmm. Christ being at the center of the border, representing peace. But it just so happened that the statue, when it was erected, the back of Jesus was facing Chile. And the indigenous people said, what's going on? This is another trick. This is what's happening. It's amazing. And we think it's silly. We're like, this is the same thing we're doing. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We are invoking Christ to fight with one another. I wonder what Christ would say, looking at us, right? And people were fighting, and another war was going to start, until a responsible journalist decided to spin the story, and he released a newspaper that was titled, "The People of Argentina Need More Watching Over the Chileans." You see? Mm. He flipped the story. Now, he's a journalist. He could have published something. How dare they? This is just, it goes back for 500 years. They've done this. But instead, he found wise wisdom. This is wisdom, right? He's still reporting, but he drove the narrative in a direction that unified everyone. And people laughed at it. It was like comical, whatever. And now it's like fun thing, right? Oh, they needed more anyway. Haha. And you laugh, and people's lives are not being lost. This is important. Parents, ask yourself what you're teaching your kids. Ask yourself. I posted this on my Facebook. I was saddened. I saw Facebook. It must have been 18, 19-year-old kids, from the Oromo tribe. And they were yelling out, down, down, Neftanya, down, down, Neftanya. Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter. And I was sad, because they're echoing what their parents are telling them, right? And to be honest, that's not just them. There's so many other, I don't care what tradition you're from. If you grew up in this country, you don't know nothing. Nothing. Admit it. Instead, let's be educated. Let's be educated. Especially parents, like, don't learn what to speak in front of your kids and what not to speak. If you want to fight and kill each other, you do that. You know, like, you ever seen couples fight? They fight for like 2-3 hours, and then what do? They're silent because they're tired. You know, like yelling hurts. It really hurts. And they think they're hurting each other, and then after that, it's quiet. I'm afraid that's what's going to happen in Ethiopia. Right now, it's yelling. Eventually, there's going to be silence because they've killed each other. This is a very sad time. Sad time. Younger generation, we've got to be able to be willing to listen to the other side. We don't have to agree. And this is the thing that really bothers me. You don't have to agree with the other person. You could just hear the other side, understand the other side. Okay, you know what? I agree with you. I said, but I disagree with you. Most of the time, the reason why we have such strong loath and hatred for the other side is because we haven't taken time to understand the grievances. I don't care what side of the spectrum you are. People are crying because people have died. The irony. And our solution is to keep killing each other. Yeah. This is sad. And why is it sad? It's because we have become blind. And we are unable to see the beauty that's in front of us. And instead, we've decided to fight about the things that we really don't know why we were fighting about. There's a story that I heard a long time ago that really, really captured my heart. There's blind people living in one house together. And one time they decided to go to the zoo. They've been blind since the day they were born, and they go around. The only way that they can kind of take in what's going on is by feeling and touching. And they get to go next to an elephant. And one of them comes and he touches the belly of the elephant. He's like, okay, this is an elephant. Okay, all right. The other one touches the ear. He's like, okay, this is an elephant. This is great. The other one touches the trunk. The other one touches the tail. And then they go home. And then they start, oh boy, that was something else today. That was something else today, wasn't it? Yeah. Yeah, the elephant, yeah, it's so round. The one says that touched the belly. And the other one says, no more round. It was like this. And the other one describes the tail. And they start fighting. But who's wrong and who's right? I feel like sometimes we're fighting about things that we really don't have all the information about, because especially if we're very one-sided, we've got to start working towards, okay, we have to work together. And the way that we're going to work together is by listening to each other. We just listen. Don't agree. It's okay. Just listen to the other side. But unfortunately, right now, people are not even willing to listen to the people that's on their side. We talk about uniting the country, but people are not even being willing to unite with each other in the same household. People that have the same political views are fighting with one another. They agree religiously, they agree politically, but yet fight about Ethiopia. They fight about, I need to hate this person more than the other. About, I am more mad than you. They fight about things that are trivial because they are blind. Yeah. We have such a beautiful country. The truth is, there are people that are dying of poverty right now. We don't have time to be fighting about this nonsense. You want to unite the country? Unite your house. Stop yelling about like all this stuff. Unite your own house. If your house is united, go be united with your neighbor. Once your neighbor is united, go unite with the town. Then you make peace with the country. You see? Right now, you're judging somebody that you don't know. You have no. We all have the same blood, the same heart, the same mind, the same and yet we keep fighting about nonsense. People are dying. We're killing each other on top of the hunger and the poverty. This is nonsense. It's nonsense. But yet it keeps happening year after year after year. We open the TV and yet more people are dying. Especially the older generation, please don't pass this hatred, this negativity, this division upon the younger generation. Keep it with you. If you want to kill each other, do it for yourself. Don't give it to your kids. It's not fair. We need a fair chance to live in this beautiful country. Don't do it to this generation. Keep your hatred to yourself. If you have to talk privately. Don't talk in front of the kids. This is the thing that is keeping us from being great. The great Ethiopia, the historical country that our forefathers have given us. This is the problem. This is the problem. Mm-hmm. We're not going to get anywhere with the direction that we're going.
Yeah. ቤተ ክርስቲያን ስለ አገር መፍረስስ ምን አገባት? ቤተ ክርስቲያን ስለ አገር መሪነት፣ ስለ አገር መምራት፣ ስለ አገር አንድነት አያገባት።
That's an interesting video that we wanted to share with you guys. That understanding of, we've been talking about how the Ethiopian Orthodox Church in Ethiopia, we could talk about the history and it's difficult to separate the two. And now there's this school of thought that's coming in that's saying the church has no say in how the government is run. The church has no say in how the country is being run. This country has been organized. And it really is one of those things, like you're saying, it's separating us because we're going around finding the smallest things that we want to blame the church for, the smallest things that we want to blame the church for, mostly because we understand, because we don't fully understand the traditional schools and we call them, backward, right? That's why the reason why we're poor is because the church this and this and that. And the reason why we're poor is because the traditional schools did these to us, right? That understanding that we're creating that continue to perpetuate this idea of the church is backward, therefore that the church doesn't have any say in how the country is organized. What is your thought about that?
Which church?
The Ethiopian Orthodox Church, of course.
The what church?
The Ethiopian Orthodox Church.
So how can the Ethiopian Orthodox Tawahdo Church not care about Ethiopia? The person who's saying this clearly doesn't understand even the name. We don't have to go into any other. The name in itself is the Ethiopian Orthodox Tawahdo Church. Forget about the mission of a church. Forget about the mission of the well-being of the world. The very fact that in the name is imprinted Ethiopian Orthodox Tawahdo Church, how could you not care about the country? A church cannot exist without a country. A country cannot exist without a church. How can it? Especially when you're talking about like the Ethiopian Orthodox Tawahdo Church. Again, honestly, I wish people would just learn. Don't pick anybody. Don't be on the church's side. Just learn. Just learn. It's not gonna hurt you. It's not gonna pick up a book, honestly, and start reading. The truth is out there, right? And at the end of the day, the reality, and if you're not a reader, you're like, I'm not gonna read. The reality is we are one of the poorest countries on earth. The people that are deciding these things to divide and to separate are the people who have food to eat. The people who are dividing us and making us fight are the people who are better off. The analogy of the tailor who has the scissor on the floor and the needle on his head and carefully holding it. Needle is cheaper, but it's honored, it's put up. The scissor more expensive, but it's thrown away. The ones who have more money are usually the ones who are thrown away because they're the ones who divide. Once You see, it makes you do things. It makes you do things. It makes you think very selfishly, and it makes you divide people. It doesn't mean that everybody who has money is negative. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is the people who are calling the shots are generally the people who are not worried about what they're going to eat for dinner. That's the reality. That's the reality. And again, for young folks, I don't care what nationality you claim, because really you're mixed. Sorry, boo-boo. But really you're mixed. That's the reality. Stop listening to one person and educate yourself all around, and then pick the right one for you. You could still go back to your old ways. No one is gonna stop you. But stop listening to one person and just getting your sources from your mom and your dad, and that's it. And then you have this idea about what you think Ethiopia is about. Stop and educate yourself. Read, learn about what Ethiopia is, and then become better than your parents. This is where evolution is needed. I don't want to be like my parents. I want to be better. I want to be a better generation. We could do better than what they did. And that's how we have to think.
Mm-hmm. I think I really like that idea. Something that reading does, at least for me, also what it does for me is that it gives you an original thought, right? You're not anymore regurgitating what someone said, what my parents said, or what the TV channel I watch says, right? I'll come up with my own understanding of what the situation is, and I'll have my own original thoughts about how to handle the situation, right? So I could actually positively add into the conversation as opposed to saying what everybody else is saying. So my challenge I've given myself, and maybe somebody else will take it up as well, if what you're saying is something that you've heard from somebody else, then maybe you should not repeat that, right? Let's take the time to learn it and understand what's happening. Then if that's what you believe, then go ahead and share it. But let's hold each other accountable in a way that the things that we say about Ethiopia, the things we say about our church, the things we say about human beings is something that we have taken the time to learn about. We give each other that much, right? It's not even asking much, but let's just give each other that much of understanding and that much of respect for our lives and for our experiences and for our struggles and anything that we have. And I think that would also help us become a very fuller human beings. I do believe that. And I mean, this is a big conversation for us to continue to have, but if I could bring you back to one question that I had asked, how do you
on this, I do want to add, it reminds me, there was a Facebook video that was kind of going around of a small kid, and I think everybody was passing it because it was sad. And it was a small kid, and they were protesting and all this stuff. And he goes, down, down, Neftanya. And then he says, down, down, Oromo. Yeah. And it was, obviously his dad is teaching him to say like down, down, whatever, another region, let's say. Yeah. What we learned from this is I saw it as a prophecy almost, right? So his dad is telling him to teach some other race, but he ends up saying down, down, and calls his own dad's race. The lesson here is whenever we tell kids to hate someone, they're actually going to end up hating you. Yeah. Right? This is the lesson that we have to take. The more we tell them to hate someone else, instead, we're telling them to hate our own selves, and then they will even walk away from parents and their own. So stop teaching hatred. It never worked, and it will never work.
It would never work. And hate always needs a place. And so if I don't find the place to put it in, I'm just going to turn around and put it on the people that taught me it, right? So that's definitely something to keep in mind. But just one more thing in this conversation. How do you personally, or how do you think we should honor the martyrs or the people that have been prosecuted in this process of teaching each other hate? How do we go about keeping their memory alive so we learn from it?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I could give you like an answer, like, pray for them and honor them in the church, but I feel like that's not enough. I think we owe it due diligence to really, when we talk about being at peace and creating peace, I really believe like start at home, you know, and it begins with your conversations with your neighbor and your siblings. It starts at home, meaning if you're at home and you're talking even with your siblings or wife or husband or whatever, stop talking about hatred even to each other. Stop thinking about it, right? We have a tendency, even right now, እነዚህ እንትኖች እንደዚህ አድርገውን. And then stuff that we don't say in public, but we say at home, and we still feel like it's okay to speak like that. It's not okay. I don't care if people can hear you or people cannot hear you. If it's up here, take it away. Don't even bring it alive. Don't bring life to it. And that's how you kill hatred. Don't worry about what the rest of the people are saying. At least if one group begins to be peaceful. And again, I'm not saying don't defend. I'm not saying don't ignore. Or I'm not saying just ignore the issues. No, we have to speak about the issues. But hatred, there's no room for it. So even when we're alone, stop pointing fingers and saying, they did this. These are horrible conversation starters. That's just not going to get us anywhere. And I think that's how we can honor them.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We're going to take a quick break just so we could change the gear of our conversation as well. Stay with us and we'll be right back.
አደባባይ ሚዲያ ለወገንተኝነት ጀርባውን የሰጠ ጊዜያዊ ጥቅምን አምቢኝ ብለው የዘመመን ሊያቀና እውነትና እውቀትን አስከትሎ ኢኮኖሚያዊና መንፈሳዊ መረጃዎችን እንካችሁ ይላል። ትኩስ ዜናዎች፣ ዘጋቢ ፊልሞች፣ ጥልቅ ትንታኔዎች በአደባባይ ሚዲያ ይቀርባሉ። ራእያችን ጊዜውን ያማከለና ዘመኑን የዋጀ በእውነት የነጠሩ መረጃዎችን በእውቀት ደግፎ ለሀገራችን ብሎም ለዓለም ሕዝብ ማዳረስ ነው። አድሬሳችን አደባባይ infomedia@gmail.com፣ ዌብሳይታችን www.adebabai.com። ያግኙን፣ ይርዱን። የሁላችንም ስለሆነች ኢትዮጵያ በአደባባይ እንዘግባለን። Adebabay Media.
Welcome back, everyone. We're having a conversation with Diakon Dawit, and we're back. I actually want to ask you about Proverbs 31 Squad. That's something that I'm part of. There's about 350, I think, no more than about 350 sisters in that group. So what is Proverbs 31 Squad, and how did you start it?
Yeah, you know, this group just it could get me in trouble, so I have to be careful because a lot of people are watching. So, just to give you background, it is a group created for it was created for young girls coming up, and the way that it was created, I just want to set the record straight because a lot of people ask me. The rule is no guys allowed. But you know, I'm the one who teaches, and people are like, wait a minute, something is up with this. What happened is when I started Sunday school, this was in my early 20s and stuff. I focused a lot on the boys, right, just naturally, and I would, you know, kind of follow them around. And the young girls at the time, the Sunday school students, rebelled, and they said, "Hey, you're not giving us enough attention. You're not giving us enough." So at that time, they wanted to kind of be guided. So I was like, okay, so we could create a group just for the girls that were there at the time, and then we had people leading that group on their own. So the idea was that I wasn't gonna really be as active, and that other people were going to go ahead and guide it. So later on, eventually it started kind of growing. It started growing, and people said, let's create a name for it. And the name was started, and it was called Proverbs 31 because on the book of Proverbs 31, we get the idea of a virtuous woman, what it means to be a virtuous woman, and it lists criteria there for what a virtuous woman is. So based on that, we started a group called Proverbs 31. We've been going strong, and every once a month we gather together and talk about womanhood. And I'm not the right person to talk about this. Really, Harawe, our sister Harawe, has really taken the initiative to take it and push it up to the next level, and she's done amazing. Amazing.
Yes, she did.
Yeah, she's doing great. So now I really get in there to teach, but and now we're getting ready for the 3rd year anniversary.
Yeah, wow. Oh, I think we lost you again.
Or even boys.
There you go.
The time.
Could you? We're losing you, Diakon Dawit. If you could,
Wow.
there you go. I got you again. Let's. Can you redo the last 10, 15 seconds as well?
Oh, I gotta wait internet when I've been.
I know.
So we've opened the door to even boys to come in, and everyone is invited for the October, I believe, 6th date. So you can look at it on social media, as on Instagram, and especially young women who are watching can join and be a part of this movement that's really going on, and talk about all the stuff that I think we were talking about. And you can say more about it. You're more equipped than I am to speak on this matter. So
I don't know about that, but I think I'll tell you what I really appreciate about Proverbs 31. I joined about a year ago, and for me, it's the sermon is definitely very like just finding the women in the church and women in within the Bible has been very instrumental for my spiritual growth, as well as being able to hear from other sisters in the church what the work that they're doing, their experiences, their spiritual journey, their worldly journey, and just really getting to know them, and also the monthly challenges that we walk away from, and to just continue to work on ourselves has been really awesome for me. So I think that's why I'm part of the group, and that's why I continue to go back. And I'll encourage anyone to go ahead and join. There's a Instagram page called Proverbs 31 Squad. Anyone's welcome, like Diakon Dawit said, and it's definitely a growing community for us, and especially for sisters that are really looking for a place to grow and be comfortable and talk about anything. So that's been really awesome for me.
And you said it for the past year or so. What we've been doing is inviting. So again, the group is called Proverbs 31, and the idea is to bring in role models for younger girls. What does it mean to be a Christian, a virtuous woman who serves within the church? So these are the type of conversations that we try to have, and what we do is we bring in people who we feel like can represent that idea, that model, and we do interviews, and they share their experience. By we, I mean Harawe. I really feel bad being even associated with this because I do very little. She does the majority of the piece, so or the work. So yes, it's been going well.
Yeah. So I guess a little bit more about you now. What keeps you up at night?
Oof. So first, if I drink a lot of coffee, it will keep me up at night. But if I'm not drinking coffee, I think this church keeps me up at night. When I think about this church, this church is like my mom. It really raised me. It saved my life. I didn't know how emotional I was about this church until a few months back when I was talking to a friend about church and stuff like that, and the conversation went sideways. I got very emotional, and I didn't think I would get emotional. I felt like someone was attacking my mom. It was very emotional, and I have this thing, and anybody that knows me, like really knows me, know I don't have rest. Like I am focused, and I am doing a lot of things at the same time because I just like this church, like this mother of ours, right, is being attacked on so many sides, and I don't understand why. I don't understand why. And again, this church has so much stuff to offer, but it's being suppressed, and for things that doesn't need to happen. And that keeps me up at night. I fear that people will not be able to hear this gospel, how amazing these teachings are, the great teachings of our forefathers, because of very few people who are loud. It's very few people, but they're loud. And the beauty, the teachings of the church won't be expanded. So I really have no rest. because I think about the next step. What can I do more? What can I do to expand this? And these things really keep me up at night. I worry about these things. What is the future like? Especially right now, what is the future like?
Yeah. So right now you have written a book, you have a podcast, you're also working on your PhD. So what are the things that we should expect from you in the near future that you want to share with us, if there's anything?
Very good. So short term, I need to complete my PhD. So I'm a PhD candidate. I'm getting this. I want to take this opportunity because I don't know when the next time is gonna be. If I may take the great platform that I've been provided. We're going live, so you can't stop this, right? The internet will not cut off.
I'm worried now, but go for it.
If there are church fathers watching, please, I need your help. Honestly, number one, through prayer. Number two, the research I am doing is directly involved with the church. I want to do something that's going to propel the church forward, that's going to help the church. I need your help. So if there's anyone watching right now who thinks they can provide me the guidance, the mentorship that I direly need, please, contact us. They should contact me, right? So I really do need a lot of help, a lot of resources. I have a huge vision for what I think the church should be, but I need direction of how to get there and what to do.
I appreciate that.
So that's something that's going to happen with the grace of God in about 3 years. I'll tell you a story about the long term. When I was 12, and I remember I remember exactly the time and everything like that. I asked myself, where am I going to be at in 10 years? I remember I was watching TV. I don't even know like how it came to me. And I said, okay, in 10 years, I should be about graduating college, but getting a job, probably in the pursuit of thinking about marriage. And have a six-pack. Six-pack thing never worked out. It just never worked out. I wasn't even close. It wasn't even. It just it didn't work out.
There's still hope.
There's still hope, right? Like
yes.
That's kind of what happened. Then at 22, again, I remember I was in a computer lab and I was thinking, I was like, wow, I'm 22. It's been 10 years and I'm about to graduate college. We talked about the six-pack, and I was about to start work and all this stuff, and marriage thing, I'm like, maybe not. So I asked myself, where am I going to be at in 10 years? And I said, in 10 years, one of two things is going to happen for sure. I knew it for sure. One, I would be married. I would have a job. I would have a house. I would have kids, and I'll be successful at my engineering job. But if I did that, that means I backed out from the mission of the church. The second trace is I would be broke, living with my mom, have nothing, but that means I stayed true to the vision of the church. And I knew those were my two options. And I'll do it. Breaking news right now, because we are on Adebabay. Breaking news. I'm about to tell you my age. I'm 32 right now. It's been 10 years.
Okay.
And it turns out I'm broke as a joke. It just turns out I actually came back to live with. I'm currently at my parents' house as we're speaking. It really happened. But I am glad because I didn't throw away the dream, the vision that I felt like God was calling me for. I'm still here, and this is through the grace of God. So now I am forced to sit back and ask myself, where would I be in 10 years at 42? And for the first time, I don't know. And that scares me. I don't know. I can't see a future. I can't see it. It used to be very clear. But given the current situation, I don't know. And I hate to end it in this note, but we need to do better. There's a lot of cloud right now, especially this year, 2020. But a friend of mine was telling me the other day, we need to grab on to hope, because it says in the Bible, I am the Lord, I am God. And I don't know anything right now except for that one thing. There's a God. We're going to get through it. This year has been tough for everyone. For everyone. What is happening in year 2020, right? What is going on? I mean, people are just getting hurt. People are dying. I get it. We're going to get through it. And we have to get through it. We have to do better. Let's be nice. Let's be kind. Let's work with each other. So I used to yell. I was having a conversation with my dad today. He was telling me that when I was young, I used to yell and stuff. And it's tiring. Are we not tired? I'm tired. Let's stop fighting. Please. Let's just work together. Let's be united. And let's have a better church. We could do it for the next generation. We owe it to them.
I mean, I think to speak to to finish on a lighter note, the thing you mentioned about being broke. I remember, I think the most I've ever been broke was when I was on campus, and myself and my 2 roommates, we don't have any money, but we needed food, so we collected all the money, like the change that we had in the house. We went to the penny changer by like the grocery store, put our pennies in, got our $2 out, and bought food like bread, onion, and tomato. And I remember till this day, we even have a picture for it. I say that to say, I think when you are in purpose, right, the fact that you don't have money is the last thing in your mind, right? Because you know where you're going, you know the direction in which you want to go to. It makes it easier. It's just to say that.
And I wish it was the last thing on the mind of my credit bureau, you know, all those bills that's coming. But unfortunately, they keep sending me bills. So it doesn't seem like I forgot. I want to forget about it. But the people who keep sending me bills,
they won't forget.
So this is a bit of a problem.
We'll send them prayers, I guess. So what does being Ethiopian mean to you, Diakon?
Being Ethiopian is, I am proud, and I could say that because I'm learning about it. I wouldn't have said it before I started reading about it. What's the big deal? I am proud. I'm proud to be Ethiopian. I'm proud to be Black. We have a story to tell. And we say it all the time. It's our differences that really brings us out. But I don't think we understand that, right? And we have something to contribute to the world. And the heartbeat of the story of Black people as a whole is actually in Ethiopia. And I'm glad to be part of that. My bloodline follows that of Tekla Haymanot. I'm proud to say that. I'm proud to have the blood of the Holy Church Fathers in my bloodline. I'm proud to say I don't want to give that up. I am proud to be part of this church. I'm proud to be part of this country that my forefathers have left behind for me. And now I feel like it is our responsibility together to pass down this great nation to the next one. And we've got to do better. We've got to do better, and we can do better. We must do better.
Thank you so much. I will promise that we'll invite you back to Adebabay. This is definitely your platform. If there's anything you want to share with us in the future, you're always welcome. But before we finish up, I want to give you a chance if you have any last minute things that you want to say to us. Also, if you could advertise where we can find your work again for those of us that joined maybe after you did that already, the books, the podcast, or if they have any published papers that we could read as well.
Very good. So the first resource that I wanted to take you guys to is yotc.org. There's a lot of resources and YOTC. If you guys go and look at the many resources they have, it's on YouTube, Young OTC. It's on Instagram. It's on and then the actual website. Right there next to it is UOTY. Of course, this came on this very platform to talk about it. There's many resources that UOTY also provides, both on the YouTube and other places. There are other organizations that are growing up. There's a lot in Texas, Dallas, Houston that has their own. Everywhere it's growing. English services are growing everywhere. I want to direct you to Diakono Gorgorios' YouTube page as well. There's a lot of resources that I think people can get to hear the word of God. I also have a YouTube page for those people who are interested. There's the book is I said it on Amazon. If you guys can support, those of you who want to become a patron, you can do that by going to Podbean and then going directly to the podcast that I have up there, and then you guys can become a patron. Patron just means you're a supporter, of course. People know what that means. So there's a lot of resources out there. Again, thank God there's so many resources, and we need to be able to share them as well.
Absolutely. Now, of course, he forgot to mention Proverbs 31, Scott. So I'll do the due diligence.
Yes, there you go.
Share that as well. Thank you so much, Diakon, for coming here and taking the time to have this conversation with us. We really appreciate it. And like I said, you're always welcome here if there's anything you want to share with us. And I just want to say to our viewers, thank you for being with us throughout this conversation. And as he said, we must do better, we should do better, and we could do better. Thank you for joining us. And until next week, have a good week.
Thank you.
Thank you.